Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 182 with Sam Green, the owner of Zest and Zeal Photography. And we talked about on that episode how she got into photography and working with her mom closely in a lot of her businesses. And we had a crazy connection where she now works out of the studio that my grandparents used to own for their business called The Art and Soul. Go back to episode 2 if you want to hear more about my late grandfather, talk about that. And it was just a really great conversation. So if you want to listen to that episode, go to the carolconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection, or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. As well, as I must mention, when this episode drops, this will be the last week to purchase the Stay Kind to Your Mind hoodies created by The Artisan, which is a collab that I have going on with Mark Furtado, the owner of The Artisan. He was on earlier this month. It is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we decided to work together. You'll see the hoodie behind me on my camera angle as we're going through the podcast. If you want to purchase the hoodie, go purchase it on his website. It's only available there. It's only going to be available for the rest of this week. And it's really great cause. He donates about 10% of net profits to Save the Ocean and other charitable organizations. So if you're going to buy a hoodie, what better way to do it than to buy with someone who's going to donate it to good causes. So, and I just really appreciate Mark and everything that he's done for the podcast, as well as creating the merch for this collab. So go get that, go support him, go support me, and I'd really appreciate that. So that brings me to today's episode 183 with AO.
Hey, what's up? I appreciate you taking the time and filling me in.
Yeah, of course. And kind of shout out a little bit to VV, who's been on the podcast
sure.
recently, and you followed off that. And I also got to say thank you to you for being willing to do today's episode. I had a conflict with a different guest in terms of scheduling, so I had to reschedule that. And you were more than willing to fill in the spot. And I always appreciate anyone that can do that because it's
Yeah.
always difficult.
Yeah, no problem. I knew like I was gonna reach out at some point, but I was like, I'm gonna just wait for like the perfect time.
Yeah.
And I seen that there was a spot, so I was like, I gotta take it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because I was joking with my girlfriend like I hate posting stuff on Instagram because I feel like no one ever responds. And when I saw you respond, I was like, thank God. Like I really needed that, and just trying to book as many guests as I can. Obviously, for people that know, I'm going for episode 200, so still on the chase for that. But appreciate you for being willing to be a part of this, and
Of course.
we'll start diving into this stuff. So a little bit just like who you are and what you're doing currently.
Well, first of all, my name is Anthony, but my artist name is AO. I make music, I engineer, and I also do full time as of now at a school.
Yeah, cool. And we'll dive into a lot of obviously why you're here is the music and the creation of the music and all that stuff. And maybe we'll touch a little bit about the job and kind of post high school stuff as
Yeah.
we're going through the podcast. And how I like to start the podcast though, like I mentioned to you off podcast, is we like to start with family dynamic here. And for any new listeners, I like to kind of give them a little like cliche like walkthrough of why I do it. And when we're talking about our families and our life story, I think our family is like the foundation to building a house. Whether it's good or bad or in between, like all that stuff adds up to who we are as people. And I think it's important to at least include that in a podcast, especially when we're talking about your life story and mental health and all this other stuff, that we start there for that, and also helps me get a little bit more insight into you and maybe a little bit of way that you were kind of brought up. So allow you to kind of take the floor with family dynamic, and obviously it's whatever you're comfortable with.
Got you. All right. Well, let's see. My growing up, my family, well, my parents, my dad and my mom, they were working a lot while like me and my siblings would be at home. So I didn't really get like that traditional family connection that like people usually have. Like, you come home from school, your parents are already home, that type of stuff. I didn't have that. I would come home from school, My parents would be working, so I'd be at home with my siblings, either playing video games inside or going outside playing with people on my street. And I feel like that really shaped who I became. Like I stayed to myself. I always became like the observer in the room, but it was also a good experience because I didn't really get the traditional experience that people usually get. So I got to see like the world in a different way. But even then, I still have a good connection with my parents, and there's some other stuff that we can get into, like when I talk about like growing up and like going into like middle school, high school, that type of stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much my family's dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and um, having that relationship where there might not be as around as other, like your friends, parents, or things like that nature.
yeah,
I'm assuming probably do just trying to work a lot and provide for the family,
yeah,
correct? Yeah. So those dynamics can be definitely difficult to manage, especially when you're young, trying to understand that and
yeah,
not having your parents around all the time to provide the guidance that you might need or want. And you don't realize that all the time until later. And when it's later, you can kind of almost appreciate at the same time the amount of hard work and effort that they put into to providing, because you never know like what they're personally going through. And I think that's
yeah,
always an interesting lens to put on as we grow up, is how we perceive our parents, like what they are like as people, and
yeah,
remembering that they are people
yeah,
too. And I think that's like an interesting thing. As the older I get, the more compassion that I get to have for my parents and that nature, where they had lives and things like that before me. Like
yeah,
it's like realizing that, it's, I think, is part of the journey of maturing, is acknowledging that aspect, is like, okay, like, yes, like they had so many different things about their life that was going on, so many different struggles that were going on, and you don't always know until you're older, where you can reflect or ask them the questions
yeah,
and see where they were. So I think it's good that you kind of see that side of things too as you get a little bit older and you get to have that
yeah.
dynamic with them.
That made me realize, like, as a kid, like I'd be like, I wonder why, like, I'm not getting like the experiences that other kids are getting. Everybody's like going to like, oh, I'm going to Six Flags, I'm going this and there, and then I'm just like, I wonder why, like, my parents have to work and like why I have to stay at home and stuff like that. But as I got older, I realized like what that meant. Like, they were trying to provide for me and my family, and like it was a sacrifice that they had to do, whether it was good or bad through my eyes at the time. But like once I got older, I got to see that. But like I remember as a kid, I'd be like mad sometimes, or like sad when I couldn't go out, or like couldn't get the experiences that other kids were getting.
Yeah, that
That
could
makes
definitely
sense.
be like frustrating when you're growing up to see the people around you and having those experiences with their family and having those relationships with their parents that you might want,
Yeah,
but not knowing how hard your parents are working. And
yeah,
the reason they're working is because they like care so much about you and your well-being, and want to put food on the table, want to provide you with a shelter and education and all these things. And in order to do that, they do have to work harder. And obviously everyone's family dynamic is different. So that's where that piece of it can be forgotten when we're
mhm,
children. We don't think about that. We
yeah,
don't know that any different. It's the
yeah.
unique aspect of being a child, is not understanding that piece of things
Mhm.
fully. So how is the relationship with your parents? Have you, as you've grown, like, have you gotten closer? Has it been more the same? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely gotten better, and like we've definitely talked about like how life is now, and like what why they had to do what they had to do, and why I had to live the way I did. So that like opened up my mind and my eyes on my childhood, and it was good that that happened because it made me realize like, oh, like I took what I had for granted because like they were providing for us, they were doing what they had to do, and it made me appreciate the small things that like happened, like going to the park every once in a while, going for ice cream and stuff like that. So it was a good moment growing up and finally realizing that um what happened happened for a reason.
Yeah, that's great.
And I agreed with that and I was happy with it.
Yeah, that's great that you're able to have that moment with them and have those conversations and appreciate things from that perspectives, taking the step back as you've gotten older. How about as we're progressing with the podcast, you're growing up, mentioned like hanging out with your friends and stuff like that, childhood. What kind of things did you do to make friends? Did you play sports? Did you have specific hobbies? Like what kind of things were you doing?
Growing up, I played soccer since I was like 5 years old. So that was like my thing, like my hobby, and that's what connected me to my friends and even people like in my neighborhood. So that was definitely like one thing that helped me growing up. If I didn't have sports, soccer in particular, I don't know what I would have done, to be honest. And another thing is video games. My older brother put me on video games, so that also helped me like connect with friends. You know, people at school would be like, "Yo, let's hop on after school," stuff like that. And even like meeting people online too. That also was like a big part of video games, and that actually made me friends online, which is crazy. Like that you can connect with someone from a different part of the world through a
Mm,
video game.
Yeah, what video games in particular did you like to play growing up?
Uh, shoot. Growing up, I played definitely Black Ops.
Yeah, I was a big Black Ops
Black
fan.
Ops,
Yeah.
even though I wasn't allowed to.
Did you see the trailer for the newest one?
Black Ops 6.
6? Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I was reading that I think I saw it on X that they've been working on this for almost like 2 years, I think it
Yeah,
was. And it's Treyarch, I think is the company that's working on it
I
again.
think so.
So that I haven't played Call of Duty in years. I went into like the Fortnite era and like
Mm.
I even like shout out to my boy Eric Lazzuto who was on episode 1. Put me onto Fortnite
Oh wow!
way before it was like popular. I remember
Like when it came out.
he's like it's a free game on on PlayStation. Like and I remember just watching him play and I was like, dude, I can't play that. I don't want to build. Like I don't want to do that. And like being so terrified to play. And then I remember I got the free. I don't know if you've played Fortnite
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
I got this free girl skin with the blue knitted hat. It was like one of the free skins you can get on
Shoot, I
PlayStation.
think I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's like such a like a newbie ass skin. There's people who don't want to spend money, and I remember having that skin and playing with him. And yeah, so I've been kind of on like the Fortnite wave
Fortnite,
for a
yeah.
while, and I still play a little bit to this day. But Madden, 2K,
Yep.
NHL, FIFA, like I've
Yeah,
always been
FIFA. I
big
grew up on
sports.
FIFA too.
Yeah, it took me a while to get into FIFA. I'm a big football, like
Yeah, yeah,
American
yeah.
football.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but FIFA is FIFA and NHL. Once I started playing those, I got addicted to those like
Yeah.
each in a different summer. It's crazy.
For me, growing up, I had different consoles, so like that also like gave me a variety of games. Like I remember having this is like this is like a throwback. I remember having a Game Boy,
Oh yeah, yeah.
a Nintendo.
Do you ever have a Wii?
I had a Wii.
Yeah,
Yep, that was but the Wii was probably
family stuff.
like the star of my childhood. Like I would have Just Dance. I do that with
Yeah,
my sister.
the Rock Band, the Guitar
Uh,
Heroes, and that came out.
yeah, that was so
It was
fun.
impossible to get the Rock Band kits. Like people going nuts for that shit.
I remember the one that I remember the most was like Just Dance 3. It was that song Airplanes by like B.O.B. and Nicki
Yeah.
Minaj. I remember that being the cover. But yeah, I just had a bunch of consoles that growing up, and like there was just so many games to play. So it was like I never got tired of them. And that pretty much helped me out from my childhood, like besides sports.
Yeah, video games are an underrated aspect of childhood, I think, because especially as we were growing up, I think back of even just when I was growing up, like getting the Xbox 360 and like
Mhm.
begging my parents to get a 360. And I missed the MW2 era like slightly. I played a little bit, but people were too good for me to like even care about that
Yeah.
at that point. I was really into Black Ops. Black Ops
Mhm.
1 and Black Ops 2 were
Yeah.
like my shit. So
Those are
like
my favorite.
yeah, so like
Yeah.
that's like I remember grinding so hard on those games. Like it was like every weekend. If it was a double XP weekend, I was playing
Oh
all
my god,
weekend.
those are
Like,
the best weekends.
dude, like, oh man, it just brings back so many good memories. Even like I could think back to like points in like school where we'd have breaks and like just thinking, oh, I get to play Call of Duty all
Yeah.
weekend. It's like winter break. You get to play video games all weekend. It's like shitty outside, so
Oh
just
my
get
god.
stuck in, and it's just pure like enjoyment of just being a
Yeah.
kid, like playing those games, playing with friends. Like even to like the point of playing zombies and stuff like that, like staying up late night,
Yeah.
sweating bullets once you get past like round like 20 into
Oh my
those and
god.
like going crazy. It's like nothing kind of beats that when it comes to video games, having those moments. I mean, even like I had those recently with Fortnite and stuff when it was like really like popular in
Yeah,
like
yeah.
2018, 2019, stuff like that. And like just going crazy. Everyone's posting that on their Snapchats, getting W's. Like
I used to do that too.
yeah, I still have them on my save, like some of my original solo dubs, like my
I have
first.
many like videos of me, like just my clips, wins, like especially if it was like high kill wins,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that stuff.
It's underrated in
Yeah,
terms of childhood of what video games provide. I remember the stereotype was always like it's like rotting our brains and like we're
yeah,
wasting time and it's the mature content isn't good.
yeah. That's what people don't realize is like the memories that are made playing video games. Like even if it's by yourself, it's fun, but with friends just makes it 10 times better. Like you guys, like I've had moments where like we're not even playing a game, but like we're all just on and we're just talking about stuff, laughing, and it's just like memories like that you can't really remake any other way,
Oh, I definitely agree
especially
with
as a
that
child.
for sure. Like I think back of um when I was telling you about how I left my job back in 2019 and stuff like that. When I moved back home, at the same time, one of my friends also quit his job and stuff like that, and we just grinded the hell out of Red Dead Redemption 2. Like we'd hop on and just like take our fucking shit and just go like hunt for different like skins and like it was just getting immersed in the game, but most of it was just us talking about life. Just
Yeah,
like
that's how it
not
is.
even like worried about the game, just like that part was so cool. And even when I moved away to Texas and stuff like that, I used to play with him and like my older brother and one of my younger brothers at the time, and we were all in different locations. But that was the one chance that we had to be together,
Yeah,
and we cherished those. Like we'd all be like busy with our lives, but as soon as the weekend came, we'd hop on Fortnite and play together. It
yeah.
wasn't so much because we like were so passionate about the game. We
Hmm.
somewhat was, but like to play with my brothers, well, like we were all in different states and so even different country at the time,
Oh wow.
but we could play together.
Yeah.
And that's like a uniting thing under video games is really cool that we don't
Hmm.
always appreciate until we get a little bit older and we
Yeah.
can't play them as much. And it's
Yeah.
like it gets a little frustrating.
Yeah.
I want to dive in a little bit about the soccer stuff.
Okay.
What specifically about soccer did you like over? Did you try other sports? Was it just always just soccer was the sport?
Soccer was just like the sport that I was put into when I was 5 years old, and I enjoyed it. It was fun, and I was a part of many like leagues. And my dad was like a coach my whole life, basically.
How do you
Like,
feel about that? Like my dad was a coach for a lot of my um, baseball and
yeah.
football and in the well, I'll let you go first and
Okay.
I'll give my opinion.
The thing is, my dad is like laid back with me, so like he wasn't as hard as me as like a typical dad coach would be like. But he definitely like pushed me at times. But I would say I wouldn't have it any other way with soccer as him as my coach. It created like a good. That was like our routine. Like every Saturday, we'd have a game day. Me and my dad, nobody else. We just take off and play or practice or whatever. So that was just like our thing, and it was pretty good. I did that for like my whole life. There was times where he couldn't be my coach, like for high school and stuff. But for growing up, he was basically my coach and my dad at the same time. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, I had the typical experience of
Yeah.
your dad as a coach pushing me, and he ended up coaching a lot of my younger brother a lot more, and I would typically have a different coach.
Mhm.
For several years, though, when me and my brother would end up on the same level or same leagues
Yeah.
age wise, we'd be my dad would be our coach, and man, I used to fucking hate that shit. That was like the worst. Like you're getting coached harder, getting pushed harder.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I appreciated it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It made me way better off as an athlete and as a man growing up. Like, and it looking back, he was there for everything. Like he
Mhm.
was part of everything.
Yeah.
Like my friends knew him. My friends had relationships with him.
Yeah.
And now sitting in my seat thinking about those moments, like I really appreciate that. And if I get lucky enough to have children of my own, I would want to be a part of their sports as well
Yeah.
and give that experience to them because you get to experience the sport together
Mhm.
and you get to learn different things about each other, which is super unique that you
Yeah,
don't get when they're kind of just watching you. When they're part of it, it's different, and I
yeah,
think that's cool.
that's true. Actually, that you mentioned that, um, my like teammates and my friends like they would get really connected with my dad, and that was just like our thing. Like everybody knew who my dad was. Everybody knew that my dad was my coach and stuff like that. And yeah, like besides like winning leagues and winning trophies, it was a good experience to like have that moment between us, and like sometimes he'd be my dad and sometimes he'd be my coach, and it
Uh,
was good to see both sides.
Yeah, that's cool to get that experience. What about was there any like maybe like life lessons that you maybe have picked up from soccer that you've been able to apply to your life, whether it's the music or anything else,
Um, life lesson.
or skills,
Oh
whatever,
yeah.
whatever.
I wouldn't say there's like a particular, but like there's just many lessons that you can learn from soccer or sports in general. Is keep practicing. Um, what's it called? Oh, sometimes the best ways to learn is to like. I don't want this to sound bad, but like you have to like really like beat yourself. Like you have to go through the pain and go through the suffering of like a hard practice, a hard loss, or whatever it may be. And that's sometimes what helps you motivate to get to the next day, next game, or whatever it may be. And I feel like that was like the biggest lesson. Because there was definitely times where like, there was a big loss or like a bad practice or like a painful practice, that being especially Hell Week. But yeah, I don't think there's a particular lesson, but that's definitely one of them that stuck by me through like life, sports, and even music.
Yeah, for sure. Loss is important
Yeah,
part of life. Like it's uncomfortable, but it's like valuable
yeah,
because no one wants to lose, no one wants to experience loss, but what loss teaches us is so many different lessons on how to reevaluate things, how to appreciate things, how to
yeah,
take those L's and eventually turn them into W's and essentially and figuring out where you went wrong and how to get better. Because if you don't work on those things, you're constantly going to be doing the wrong things over and losing all the time. And a lot of my sports career, I did lose a lot, and
yeah,
some of it's not like my fault. It's a team thing.
yeah,
But sometimes there was stuff that I did bad that I definitely could have gotten better at, and being more accountable is another aspect with
yeah,
loss. So it's many different things you can learn from sports that I think are super valuable.
yeah,
As we're progressing with your life story here, let's start getting into high school and things of that nature, a little bit of middle school. I know you said off podcast, this is kind of where the early iterations of the interest in music and creation of music started.
yeah.
So I'll let you kind of dive into that a little bit.
um, so like I didn't take music seriously the first year that I started quote unquote making music. It just kind of happened. Me and my friend were me and my friend would play. It's crazy. Me and my friend would play Fortnite a lot, and we'd be in a party chat. And most of the time, we'd just be talking about life and stuff like that. And I remember we we were this is like the SoundCloud era, you could say, where like everybody was like into SoundCloud and like there was so many SoundCloud rappers coming out. And me and my friend liked rap. And I remember one time we just challenged each other to like come up with bars. And like we do like a bar off. Like I'd have a bar ready, he'd have a bar ready. We see who had the best one. And that's kind of where the music interest started. And one day we ended up turning that little moment of like making bars to try to see if we could make a song. And from there, we ended up making multiple songs. We ended up doing collab songs. And I remember this being on GarageBand on the iPhone back when there was like no apps like BandLab that's out now. And I remember that's where like my music started, but like I didn't really take it serious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is like kind of like playful
Yeah, yeah,
with it. You're kind of just experiencing and experimenting with what it could be.
yeah.
And it's like that early spark. Were there any specific artists at that time in the SoundCloud era that you were like, you guys that really bonded over?
Um, shoot, there's a bunch. X, Juice World, Um,
Would you say those have influenced your style of music?
I think Juice WRLD and A Boogie was like my influence because I ended up going into the melodic rap before I was just like rapping and stuff. But there was definitely artists that like I looked up to in the SoundCloud era. But like two main ones that influenced like my development of music was definitely like A Boogie, Juice, and there's probably some other ones that I'm forgetting about.
Yeah, did you start posting during like what how old about or what
Uh
grade
oh yeah,
level?
I should have said
No,
that.
you're fine.
This is like 8th grade summer. So I was already graduating from middle school and I was 14.
So like getting ready to go into high
Yeah.
school and stuff.
And this is why I took that step because I wasn't in middle school, so my friends couldn't embarrass me. It was in the summer, so like, nobody knew where I was going to high school yet because I didn't know myself. So I was like, let me just take this opportunity to post because my friends can't say nothing to me in person. And I remember I posted on SoundCloud my first ever song, and it was featuring with my friend. And I remember when I posted that, my rap name was Lil Tony, and so many of my friends from middle school were listening to it, and it was just like a laughing matter. I was even laughing at my own music, but that really like sparked something in me to like want to do it more. Even though like I was looking at it as a joke and like the bars were like funny, like ignorant kind of, but at that moment I realized like this is kind of what I wanted to do. And at the time I thought it was rap, but later on when I talk about like how I developed, I knew it was just music in general.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And trying to overcome that initial posting fear was probably tough. I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine having something like this podcast during that era of my life. Like middle school is one of the most ruthless time periods of anyone's life, and it's good to know that people are still experiencing that.
Yeah.
Because like I just remember the judgment, the joking, like
Oh
you
my
do one
god.
thing wrong, everyone's making fun of you for
Yeah,
it. Like, and it's just a weird time in people's lives. People are going through puberty and all this weird shit, like trying to
definitely.
figure out like who they're gonna be in high school
Yeah.
and these different relationships. And yeah, it's I can only imagine the amount of stress and anxiety you might feel in your generation coming up,
Yeah.
where social media is way more prevalent for you guys than like I mean really had it like AIM messaging and like Facebook at the time when I
Oh
was really
wow.
going up. Like and Instagram and Snapchat was like coming into like my high school experience, but
Mhm.
like Facebook was like very prominent. It was like for a rate, like for like a post or whatever, TBH and like all
I
these
remember
crazy
that era.
things. And Instagram was like very basic. It wasn't like it is
Yeah.
today. So like how was that experience for you trying to post kind of into like that summer going towards high school?
At that time, social media wasn't as like crazy as it is now. There was definitely Snapchat, Instagram. mm, I don't remember using Facebook at all at that time. It was just like Snapchat and Instagram. But it wasn't like as crazy as it is now with like people hating on you, people like choosing just to do everything but support you. At that time, it was just like, well, my social media was just my friends, like people in my area. So like they were the ones that were listening to my music. So it wasn't really like, people from like, I don't know, like, how people nowadays, like, they'll just comment on anything, whether it be like a small artist or a big artist, they'll just hate on anybody. But at that time, it was just people in my area, my friends, stuff like that. But I would say social media helped a little bit at the time because it put my song out there. So it was definitely a good tool to use.
How did the music progress into high school? Did
Um,
you take a break? Did you take it more seriously as you started getting further in high school? Like, what was that experience? And then obviously, COVID comes into a point at
yeah.
some point. I don't know what year you were, but I would like for you to go
Um,
into that a little bit too.
got you. I think I did rapping for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I would drop a song like every now and then, and my rapping back in the day was, how do I say it? Um, I guess you could go with like ignorant. Like I would say a lot of um crazy things in my rap. And there was a point where like I realized my music was getting into people other than my friends. Like family members were listening, um, like random people were listening, and I realized like this is not what I want people to think of me, and this is not what I want to portray to the world about me. So that's when I kind of switched from like rapping to like the melodic style, and I think this was in sophomore year. So I was about like 16, and I ended up dabbling into like auto tune to create like harmonies and melodics, and also changed like the words that I was using in my songs. So it wasn't much like ignorant and profanity, but like I try to portray little messages and stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems like it's a way more positive spin on things, and I think that's
Yeah,
really impressive to acknowledge what people might think of you based
mhm,
on like the ignorant
yeah,
music you're making at the time,
yeah,
like to use your own words, but like you're a kid
yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
Like obviously you don't know better, and luckily for you, you're able to catch yourself too. So like
yeah,
I think that's really impressive, and not a lot of people would be able to kind of catch
yeah.
themselves in something like that.
And it's not like I cared about like what people thought about me, like in a way to like bring me down or something. But like I realized like what I was portraying myself, and I didn't want that. So it wasn't like, oh, I don't want people to like, I don't want people to like comment about me. It was more like figuring out a way for me to present myself to people in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to, I think, to hit on is how we want the world to see
Yeah,
us. Like it's not so much caring about other people's opinions,
yeah,
but if people see you and your content, music, whatever is negative or
yeah,
toxic or pushing certain agendas or whatever, that's going to be what people perceive you
yeah,
as. And
exactly.
if you want that out there as your persona, that's fine. But I think what's more positive and beneficial is actually putting out something that's more genuinely you.
Mhm.
And it takes time to figure that out and going through different trials and errors and what content or music is going to best fit you.
Yeah,
But I think once you find that lane of like, all right, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to be, being able to showcase that to the world is such a valuable skill to have, because too many people pretend like they don't care about what people think,
yeah,
but we all do care what people think about us at the end of the day. Like to sit
it's
here and
true.
say that we don't is kind of asinine when we're like
Mm,
doing social media stuff and we're posting. Like you'd say you're
yeah,
not posting for anyone, but as we are posting for
yeah,
some form of validation, whether it's the likes or a specific person to like it,
yeah,
or your family, whatever it is. Like we are posting for something, and when you're acknowledging that and posting something that's positive and a better representation of you, I think is a great thing. So for you to make that pivot at such a young age,
yeah.
super impressive.
Also, like I can't say that I did that by myself. Like
Someone called you out.
I've had different encounters of people like calling me out. Like close friends would tell me like, "Yo, you're not like this. Like this is not the Anthony that I know." And like I've had people tell me like, um, what's it called? Like, damn, like you be swearing a lot in your songs and stuff like that. And I actually have one big encounter. I don't know if you know who Patrick CC is.
No.
He's what do you describe? He's like reviews music. He's like into the music scene. He's pretty good friends with people in the industry. And I submitted a song to his live stream, and he checked it out. And I didn't even care like what he said, because he said, "Oh, it's not my style." But the comments that people were saying about my song, I was like, "Damn!" Like I really need to self reflect and really think about what I'm putting out there, because like that was a good example for me to see how people of the world see me and my music, and that really showed me like if that's who I wanted to be. And I still have that video on my phone to this day. um But there was definitely more than one encounter that made me like change my music, my style, and like things that I would say and messages that I would put in my music.
Yeah, and the thing with that too is you didn't change though until you wanted to change.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. It's like you could have 1,000 people say, "Hey, man, you need to change your music. This is like crazy," and you could be like, "All right," and then still keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
But until you want to change is when change actually happens. And do you use that video kind of like as motivation still to this day? It seems like.
Yeah, yeah. Every now and then, like if I meet new people in the music, or like even if I need to like, I do this thing where like I go through my camera roll like every like month or so, just to look back on life and memories or things that I may forget. And that video always pops up, and I'm just like, wow, I've grown so much since that time, like music wise, as a person, and all that. But that's definitely a video I will cherish forever. And I hope to do a video of the same thing, but him reacting to like something new to
Yeah,
see like how much I've actually grown.
I think that'd be really cool
Yeah.
just to have that out there and to even you to react that to him reacting to your video or
Yeah.
to your music and stuff like that. It allows the opportunity for like those like videos that you see of someone like sucking like really bad at something and then like having that major
Yeah,
glow up
yeah,
to where they go to and having that moment. It's like a character building moment, low key, to kind of experience that. I mean, credit to you though, you signed up for it too. At the
yeah,
same time, some people might be terrified to have their music
yeah.
like visually critiqued in front of people
Mhm.
live. Like that's can be quite scary to kind of
Yeah.
experience. So I mean, kudos to you for trying to do that. Like, and I'm glad that it turned you into something more positive.
Yeah.
That's more authentically you. I think that's a good message for people. What about as you're going through high school? I don't know when COVID was like a big thing for you, but like, how was that experience, and did it have any impact on your music?
Yes. So right when all of that happened, it was like my sophomore slash freshman year. Excuse me. And right into my junior year, I was still making kind of the same music, and that's when COVID hit, and it was all quarantined. And luckily, I had a home studio in my own house, so I was still making music during that time. And that was when I really like self reflected and really like kind of like sat down with myself to think about what kind of music I wanted to make and what kind of music I wanted to put out there. Because like there's music that sometimes I would make for myself to still like cherish the old days, but there's music that like I just want to put out there. And during this quarantine, I ended up making like an album, which is crazy to think about. And I ended up using a few songs that were like still a bit ignorant, just to like it was like a way to like show like it was like leaving my character, and I also implemented new songs, and that's when I started getting into Spanish music. I always knew Spanish and it was always in my culture, but I never knew how to put it into music, like make it my own. And that's when I started making Spanish music and kind of like getting creative with that. And during high school, it was weird because we were quarantined, so I couldn't really use my high school environment to like be like, "Yo, this is my new song. This is my new project." Like I couldn't really promote myself in that way in person. Everything was online. So I feel like that kind of like I don't want to say ruined because I personally think things happen for a reason, but it was definitely a challenge to kind of put myself out there because, I think the best way to put yourself out there is through like physical in person encounters. And that was definitely a challenge, but luckily senior year we was able to come back into the school, but I had taken a break from music unfortunately, and I didn't really release nothing that year. But I was starting to develop myself as a person and kind of put music to the side. So I think that was like a needed moment in my life because I was going through weird phases of like senior year and like growing as a person, trying to grow up my music, and there was definitely many roadblocks that year. So it was like a good needed moment to like take a break from music and develop as a person in many ways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Having COVID really interrupt like 2 important years of high school, honestly. Like
Yeah,
that's like people really felt bad for seniors when COVID happened, but as it started to go on further, people really started to understand like what juniors we're going to have to go through
yeah,
to lose all your junior year and then senior year really not be the same as what it
yeah,
was. And luckily schools for the most part have gone back to normal, I guess, or
yeah,
the new normal. But you were really robbed of 2 of the most precious years of people's
yeah,
lives sometimes, like, those 2 years of growth, like, where you're really starting to change from just, like, a teenager and getting closer towards 18 and turning like an adult almost.
yeah.
Obviously, 18 doesn't feel like an adult at the time,
No, it
but,
does
like,
not.
hitting that age where life is gonna start getting more real and all those
Yeah,
childhood memories and feelings start fading, and
yeah,
you will see your friends less, and you're not going to go to the school you went to for most of your life or be around those friends that you were most of your life. And I think a lot of those kids really suffered, and
yeah,
I think are going to continue to suffer because of that experience. And it's up to people to really dictate how they let that define them. And it sounds like what path that you're on is that you're choosing not to let that prevent you from doing things. Like you said, you were pursuing personal growth your senior year and like really working on yourself as a person and
yeah,
seeing where you could go with things. And I think that's a really positive experience.
yeah. Not to get like too deep into like emotions and stuff, but like
This is the perfect place for
yeah.
it, man. It's okay.
You're right, you're right. But I feel like um as like a student, as a child, as a teenager during COVID, it was like people who have experienced COVID as a teenager, like that have like that consciousness as a teenager, they are able to like relate that it was like one of the darkest periods of like, well, as my life. I don't know, people could probably relate to that because like you're stuck in a house, and if you really have like no hobbies or anything like that, you're really just stuck like in your mind almost. And there was definitely times where I was like unmotivated, even though I had the music, even though I had friends, video games, and stuff like that. There was definitely like moments where like I was just in my head, and like there was many like lonely times where I was just like thinking about life. I remember there was a moment where I thought the world was gonna end and stuff like that. So people need to I feel like people that went through it, they need to be heard because that was actually like a crazy time in history. Like to even think about going through that and actually going through it. And I feel like I just needed to like shine light to it because it was definitely not an easy time, and there was definitely a lot of challenges aside from like, people dying and people being seriously ill and stuff like that, losing jobs and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really important because now that you guys are starting to come of age and getting into those spaces where some people are going to college, you're voting, you're entering the workforce, like this stuff matters. Like
Mm,
COVID really did affect the youth, and
yeah,
people don't want to really talk about how damaging of a time that was. You took
yeah,
essentially really almost 2.5 years away from
the world.
the world, and especially children learning in schools.
Yeah,
Like you said, personal in person encounters are valuable. Like
yeah.
for anyone to sit there and say, and I'm a proponent, I love like working remotely and stuff like that, but I will always still say that there's tons of value of being in person with people.
Yes.
Like as much as I'd rather work from home, but I understand the value of working side by side with my team and
Yeah,
being there like in person with them and seeing them, or even doing the podcast in person, like I've never really wanted to do virtual podcasts because there's like a certain energy and vibe to the room
Yeah,
when you're doing podcasting that you're not going to get virtually. Like
exactly.
people could say it, but it's similar and it's a great podcast and all that stuff.
Mm,
Um, I guess it really depends on the podcast host and the guest, but
yeah,
I really truly say that you need to be in person for podcasting. It's just the experience of it is just so much better.
yeah,
And obviously, there's going to be circumstances where you can't be in person, and that's where virtual is a great tool to have. But I couldn't imagine getting into the depths of the conversations that I've had with people virtually.
yeah.
Like I've had plenty of people cry on the podcast. Like
Mm.
I don't know if it would be as impactful if I'm watching them cry on a screen. Like seeing them and feeling their energy of them talking about something emotionally charged that happened in their life and venting about it on the podcast hits way different than if I watched them talk about it on the screen. It just I
Yeah,
don't think that would have the same impact
yeah.
that it does. And
Or they probably wouldn't have felt that way if it wasn't in person.
yeah, they might not have reached that level of emotion with me in the conversation. And I appreciate the people that do want to get into that space. But I think that's a really great point that you made about what people went through, especially kids, especially even diving deeper into that, those junior and seniors of high
Yeah,
school to
definitely.
because man, I don't know where I would be if I lost those 2 years.
Mm,
I went through a lot of change those 2 years and in preparation of life going forward. So I
yeah.
couldn't imagine uh, what people in your shoes had gone through. As we're progressing with the podcast, still getting towards like the good stuff, the
Mm.
music. Um, we've been touching upon it throughout, but how has the music grown post high school? Where have you been taking it? What's the goal with it? Like, tell me more about that.
So post high school, um, so during like my last few months of senior year, hold on, where am I going with this? Okay, so this junior year summer, I worked at this school where I graduated from in middle school, and they basically told me like whenever I'm free to work, I'm allowed, like I'm welcomed. So senior year, I reached out and they guaranteed me a job in the summer. And at the time, I kind of figured like I didn't want to choose the college path. Like there was so many factors that made me decide that. So I decided I was just gonna work, make money, and go about it that way. So I ended up having a job after high school, and it was pretty good because I didn't have to stress about schoolwork. I didn't have to worry about using my brains all day. And believe it or not, like using your brain all day really takes a lot out of you. And that happened to me during school. And working is just a bit different. It depends what you do. But for me, I love what I do. I love um, being active, using my body as a tool. And that's what I just like to do. So after senior year, I got into work and I would basically manage work and music. That was the only two things I would do. So like after work, I would get into my zone, start making music, and that would just be like my constant routine. And I didn't really have a plan for music, to be honest. Um, I I like to see into the future sometimes. Like I like to plan things out, but for this music, it was different because like I was still experiencing like new sounds. I was still trying out like what I really wanted to get into because I was doing melodic music. I was doing Spanish, so I was like kind of like dabbling into different things. So I didn't really know like what my how do I say it? Like I didn't know what my like lane was, because I was like in different lanes, like trying to experiment with different sounds and different styles. So I would say I kind of just freestyled my way of music. I just would drop whenever I felt like it. I would make music. I would just stack up my vault. And I think where I really took a turn was when I signed up to become an engineer at BO8. That's when I realized I needed to take a further step to develop my music, and I'm glad I took that step because I ended up meeting some really good people, and I ended up developing my music in the way that I wanted to, and I can get into that a little bit more,
Yeah,
but that's just kind of what the timeline, I guess you could say, was.
yeah. In terms of taking that step for yourself, was it difficult? Was it a little bit scary at first to like? It's because like at that point you're like, all right, now I'm really starting to take this seriously.
Yeah.
Like, and for some people, it's fun when it's like a hobby and stuff. But when you really start to like, all right, I'm gonna really apply myself now and like really push this forward, it can get scary because it gets real. So like, how was that for you?
Um, it was definitely like a different step because not only was I gonna be like training at a spot and potentially work there, I was gonna have to change like my whole routine. So like I was in my home studio for years. Like I would make music by myself. I'd record myself. I'd mix myself. I wouldn't like let nobody in the room with me. Like I'd be locked in by myself. So like to be able to like expand that with others, like I don't mean to say randoms, but like random people, it was like a whole different step. And I've been a shy guy my whole life, and that's the reason why I was like doing music by myself. So it was definitely like a big step, but I knew that I needed to do that in order to like move on to the next step of music and becoming an artist because I had a realization where I was like, I can't be a shy artist. Like you can be a shy artist, but like I've got to know that like in order to move up from here, I've got to meet people, I've got to interact with people, I got to have uncomfortable conversations, be in uncomfortable scenarios where I'm not used to. And I was like, you know what? I got to do it now cuz like there's an opportunity in front of me, and if it's meant to be, then it'll work out. So I did that, and it did end up working out.
Yeah, I mean, here you are heading
Like
on a
here I am,
podcast
yeah.
too, and like talking about music and your
Yeah.
life, and I think that's like a really dope thing to
Yeah.
at such a young age too. Like, I don't know if I had reached that like mindset yet, where it just clicked, and I was just like balls to the wall pursuing this shit, and it took me a while to like finally click. Like, I just kind of I was telling you some of my life story and kind of going through the mundane repetitive things and trying to like figure it out. And I kind of was just like, oh, I don't have a thing. And that's
Mhm.
where the podcast kind of birthed itself.
Yeah.
And for you to kind of realize, like, I need to network. Like,
Yeah.
I need to network. Like, this, if I'm going to do music, I need to work with others and collab with others and
Yep.
see how they do what they do. And I think collaboration is so key when it comes to content because you get to see how other people work. You get to see
Yes.
what they do, what their routine is, and you might not take everything from them and you shouldn't, but there's going to be certain things that they do that you could take and apply to your craft. And I think not enough people embrace collabs for that reason because their
Yeah.
fear is competition a little bit. You might
Yeah.
be afraid to work with people who do the same thing because you're like, what if these people are better than me? Well,
Yeah.
damn, I hope they're better than you
Yeah.
because you'll learn something if they
Learn.
are.
Yeah.
Like, if you're hanging around with people you're better than, quote unquote, you're probably not growing much. Like,
Yeah.
you want to be around people that are going to push you to be better. And I think taking that step to be like, all right, time to like take this seriously and put myself in those situations is amazing. And for you to do that, I think that is crazy. So, what about the music now? What's the goal for AO and his music going forward? Like, what's the kind of the path? Because we are getting to the end of the podcast, so I want to
Oh
kind of
shoot.
allow you to kind of talk about this.
Time goes by fast.
It does. It does.
um I don't have a particular goal. I like to have many goals that like lead up to a goal, but like I don't know that goal, if that makes sense. So like I set myself little goals on the side, and I know they would lead up to a goal, but I just don't know what that goal is. So my goals right now for music is to keep developing my craft, keep being confident in what I make. That's really what has changed this year from all the years I made music, I'm actually confident in what I have. I'm confident in sharing my music. I'm confident in people hearing my music because before I would be shy whenever someone mentioned my music or like if someone was listening to my song, I'd be like, "Ah, man, why you gotta embarrass me?" Like, that type of stuff. But I feel like I'm at a point right now where like I can make a song and I could comfortably and confidently share it with you and like, you could hear it and I'd be like, "Yeah, that's me." And I just want to keep developing that and keep putting that into content and be in front of the camera more because that's really what I've been lacking since I started making music. And there's really a lot of events that um have shown that like that's what I'm doing differently this year. I've been on the camera more, which is crazy to say because I've been a shy guy my whole life. But you got to make a change to benefit whatever it is you're going through, whatever it is you want to do. And I realized that, and I'm trying to really aim for that to just really do uncomfortable things that I've never been used to in order to help me develop as an artist, as a person, etc.
That's good. Yeah, I think putting yourself in those situations that's uncomfortable is the only way to grow.
Yeah.
And being on this podcast, I think, is another step towards that, where you get to say you've experienced what a
Yeah.
podcast is like, and to go through the experience, and as uncomfortable as it may be, talk about yourself and get a little bit personal
Yeah.
and share those details. Um, I do have one more question aside from that other question that I told you at the end, but
Okay. Gotcha.
I thought about this as we were talking. Um, what does music mean to you?
Oh shoot.
That's a deep one, but like you can take that
It's
wherever
a
you
deep
want to go.
question. Um, Music means a lot to me. Like even if I didn't become an artist, I still love music. Um, Shoot, I could just say music is love. Like music can bring people together. Music lightens up the mood. Music is just it could be whatever you want it to be. You could make music peaceful, you can make music, your motivation. Whatever it is that you desire, that's what music can do, and that's why I love music.
Yeah, I think that was really great. Actually, you really allowed it to just be, and I think that's
Yeah.
what music is. It's whatever you want it to
Yeah.
be. It can heal. It can cause motivation, and it can inspire. There's so many different things that
Yeah.
music can do, and I think that you hit on really great points right there. So like I said, we are getting towards the end, so I do
Yes,
have that
sir.
one more question for you. But before I get to that, is there anything that you wanted to mention? I'll allow you to plug your stuff at the end of the
Okay.
podcast. But is there anything that you wanted to hit on before we get to that last question?
Um,
You don't have to. I just like to offer my
okay.
guess in case.
Nothing in particular. Just really appreciate this moment.
Yeah, of course, my man. So AO, the last question that I have for you
So
is, what would your advice be for someone who wants to pursue their passion?
I think there's definitely different pieces of advice that you could use, and I'll give a few. One thing is you gotta be able to be uncomfortable in situations because in order to develop your passion, whatever it may be, you're gonna have to confront a situation where you're not comfortable or where you're not really experienced. But those are the experiences that you'll need, whether it's beneficial, whether it's a lesson or a loss. Because at the end of the day, any experience is a learning experience, whether it be good or bad.
Perfect. I think that's really well said, and that hits home the point that we've kind of talked throughout this podcast
Yeah.
is putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. And I've always been a huge advocate of saying get out of your comfort zone. I
Yeah.
mean, that was like the whole push with this podcast early on, was this was way out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert actually.
me,
Like
me too.
like I don't like lots of people and talking. That's why the
Yeah.
one-on-one thing always worked for me, and that's why kind of here we are today. But
Yeah.
I really appreciate you for being willing to come on this podcast and talk about your life and your music. And I just really appreciate anyone that sits across from me and does the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Of course, if you want to look in this camera, you can plug your music into
Yeah.
that camera.
Um, Shoot. I haven't done this ever. You can find my music anywhere, any platform, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. It's A.O underscore 401. A.O underscore 401.
Perfect. And I encourage you guys to check out his music. Again, thank you.
Of course, of course.
For you guys, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. Check out the carrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up for you. And again, if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. And one more time, if you guys want to buy the merch to Stay Kind to Your Mind hoodies, go to the Artisan website. Please purchase that. 1 week left, only available in the month of May. Get them while you can. So, till next time, guys. Peace.